Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In this session, we are going to present to you, there will be a number of presentations on synergies, on possible synergies between Cluster 4, Digital Industry and Space, and other programs. So my colleagues and I will take you relatively quickly over those possible synergies, and then we will have some time for questions through Slido. And the synergies we are going to present to you are the synergies with Cohesion policy, the European Regional Development Fund, and the European Social Fund Plus, the Single Market Program, the Digital Euro Program, the European Space Program, and the European Defence Fund. And now can the colleague take the next slide.
Many thanks, Nicholas. Hello, everyone. So what I would like to present or give a short introduction from the side of the policy and programming service. What do we have in mind when thinking about synergies with Horizon Europe and other programs, respectively programs in the context of Cluster 4, of course. So one slide before, please. It's about the general philosophy where we say, am I able to switch the slides, or does...
I'm switching them.
There's one slide before, I think. No. So in general, what we want to communicate or to explain with the slide before this one is how to go or think of synergies. So to avoid only looking on the combination of different funding, but thinking about the strategy first. So when applying for a project or several projects or actions, having a strategy in mind and thinking about what should be achieved. So then you get ready to design synergies and say, how do you combine your proposal in Horizon Europe, probably with other programs and other actions to achieve your strategic goals. First, the strategy. Secondly, to look where the funding comes from. That's why we show this table where we highlighted the programs from the other MFF programs, which most probably will be relevant for your Cluster 4 initiatives, and to see what's crucial to enhance synergies. If you look on the right, so first the compatibility in terms of rules and harmonization of funding possibilities and the flexibility to bring funds and the management of the projects from application to project finalization and reporting together, and the coherence of the agendas and the topics. So the programming itself, when you bring together and say, for example, to have a foundation for research in Horizon Europe and demonstration and taking up of results, for example, in the single market program or in Connecting Europe facilities.
Yes, I'm sorry, there is a technical problem with the slide. I'll bring it back.
Yeah. So that's the purpose what we are envisaging, and it's clear the programming is necessary to prepare the ground for you as an applicant, where you can build on and say synergies happen by implementation. First programming, then the implementation on projects tasks within the projects and the combination, the smart combination of different actions.
I'm bringing the slide back. My apologies for that.
No worry. That leads us to the principle I already mentioned, synergies by design, thinking on what is really necessary to design synergies. We tried to illustrate it in these bubbles. So it's important to have a clear governance, to have a policy framework. You need skills development, knowledge management. So not coming only from the programs, but to see what do I need to design synergies and to design a strategic, successful project landscape. And then I go into the projects. What we took out to illustrate what we have in mind by, for example, the pathway from research to deployment. So research as not a purpose on its own, a goal, an objective on its own, but really for the purpose of deployment and market or social impact. There's a technical difficulty.
Yes, sorry, can we take a very short break to resolve this? Because I think there is a problem with the presentation.
Yeah.
We take a short 1 minute break. Our apologies for this.
We hold on.
Yes, sorry. Are we off now? Are we off air?
No presentation yet.
Yeah, I'll bring it back.
Thanks. Thanks, Nicholas. It looks great. So
yes, so
let's jump right into the next one, please. So this is what I mentioned. I just mentioned with the synergies by design. Let's say the menu or the recipe. So what do we need, and what are the contributions by engaging different programs beyond Horizon Europe to get education and skills to pave the way from research to deployment. The harmonization of rules and procedures I just mentioned, and also the coherence of the policy framework, but also transparency and knowledge management to really know what's on the market for funding, for financing, for strategic approaches and program and policy needs, and the governance, and last not least, the incentivation to really go the extra mile and design synergies to raise the impact, as it will be mentioned in concrete programs aspect by the colleagues in the following presentations. So I pick out with the next just two of the two left bubbles, the pathway from research to deployment. With the next slide, please. To make clear, we are doing research, yes, and combine it with the other programs to get really to deployment on the market and commercialization and for impact for the social benefit. So it's So the next slide. Still, it got stuck, huh? Hmm.
Shall we move to the next one?
Yes, please. I thought it's still a technical issue. Just quickly through the next 2 slides, please. That's pathway from research to deployment, and then education and skills in detail.
Yes, now we have the ESF Plus.
Yes, but I still see the bubbles, synergies by design. It's not switching currently.
I think there is. Yes, could that be? Is this resolving it?
Yeah, that would help. Yeah, if you.
Are they moving now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Some more back.
Apologies for that.
No worry.
And you need which slide now?
2 back, so from pathway to 1 more back, please. Great, thank you. So that's what I mentioned just briefly. Pathway from research to deployment to really see we need to build on research to provide support along the value chain to in terms of feedback to policy making, demonstration projects, infrastructure and facilities development, go-to-market, and especially also thinking of public procurement for innovation or pre-commercial procurement. So that's what I meant in addition to research, in addition to the typical Horizon Europe projects, complemented by the other programs which will be presented. So that's also about sequential financing along the value chain. And the next slide, please, picks out the really necessity of education and skills. That's where you see in the topics, when you look in the calls, also the proposals, for example, on, as Nicholas just said, for example, combination of Horizon Europe with ESF Plus in the different perspectives, teaching or skills for citizens, for researchers and their curricula, for students, but especially also for workers and employees, thinking of the different areas in the healthcare sector currently to deploy innovations for digitalization and other things in healthcare, and also public authorities to make decisions and deploy it in the public sector. The next, please. So we also brought 2 concrete examples to illustrate what we do have in mind when looking on the past framework program, Horizon 2020, where we have a really fruitful and really impactful combination, smart combination of programs and projects. In this case, from the hydrogen and mobile sector for buses, one project where we deploy on bus fleets and the other on the refueling infrastructure around it. So it's a combination of the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking in Horizon 2020 and Connecting Europe facilities on the European level. If you look on the right, we have different fundings, contributions from national programs, but also from, and you will receive information from Peter Schenk afterwards, from the cohesion policy or structural funds, and also investments from the EIB. So you have a clear strategy how to switch or how to research, demonstrate and deploy in the hydrogen-driven public transport sector and make it happen and get it on the ground and on the streets. And the next one, please, is as example from the healthcare sector, where there are significant improvements through research and short routes to market from research by public innovative procurement and a combination of the past two framework programs, structural fund investments, and different regional investment schemes and deployment, in this case, as a first adopter of intensive care unit cockpits in the University Hospital of Aachen in Germany, but also in combination with the region of Limburg in the Netherlands and Belgium. So just to give you an impression on these concrete examples, what we do have in mind, happy to discuss further what does it mean for Horizon Europe. Thanks a lot, and I hand over to the next presentator.
Many thanks, Max. And Peter Schenk is now going to take us over the cohesion policy funds.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Max, Nicholas. So synergies with cohesion policy fund. Why are we looking in particular at the ERDF and the ESF? It's these are two funds which are in terms of amount, of potential amount of funding available for research and innovation, which are particularly important. If you look at the previous programming period, so 2014 to 2020, just to give you an idea of the amount available, you have from the ESF, so European Structural Investment Fund budget, around 40 billion that was allocated to research and innovation activities. If you compare that to an amount of around 76 billion for Horizon 2020, you can see it's a very significant amount of funding. And out of this 40 billion, it's around 95% from the ERDF. So there's a lot of potential for synergies with this fund. For the new programming period, you see the figures on the slide. It's around in total, it's around 392 billion roughly. If you also add the national co-funding, it's will be around 500 billion euro available. And again, the ERDF being responsible, let's say, for the most part of R&I support. Just to add that there's a new also instrument under the ERDF in the current period, which is also quite important for linkages and synergies, and that's an interregional innovation investment of a bit more than 500 million available, and this is to support, to encourage the development of European value chains, mobilizing innovation ecosystems to scale up and commercialize interregional innovation projects. And one of the explicit objectives under this instrument is also to strengthen complementarities between national, regional, and EU funding instruments. So yeah, so and this yeah, please the next slide then. Yeah, here you can see what can be supported under cohesion policy. In the current programming period, there are 5 broad policy objectives. It's more, it's less objectives, and there are more broad. In the previous period, you had 11 thematic objectives. Now you have 5, which are broader in order to break up sectoral silos. And you can see here what type of activities, priorities can be supported. It's quite broad, so there's no limitation really in terms of thematic scope. For example, it also covers the whole of Europe. And the most relevant for research innovation is, within the policy objective 1. And there you can see developing, enhancing research and innovation capacities, and the uptake of advanced technologies is one particularly relevant, and but also the other ones, and also developing skills for smart specialization, industrial transition, entrepreneurship. So it's quite a broad range of areas that can be supported. Here you will find the typical research innovation support under the ERDF. technology transfer and build-up of industrial R&I capacities, for example. So this is under this policy objective. Now, I would also mention that the other objectives are also important for research and innovation, and this is in particular when it comes to deployment of Horizon Europe results, for example, of deployment of innovative solutions, for example, also under policy objective 2, which is greener, low carbon Europe, or 3, which is about connectivity, transport, ICT connectivity. So this is also relevant when it comes to deployment of Horizon results. Policy objective 4, I think Raphael will come back to that later. Here you can see the priorities of this ESF related policy objective. Next slide, please. Could we have the next one, please? Thank you. Yeah. So what is important on any for the ERDF? You can see here on the right-hand side, you can see again the specific objectives that are particularly relevant for R&I. Also the general scope, which is very broad under the ERDF. And what is important is that anything that is supported under research and innovation from cohesion policy has to be in the framework of smart specialization. So in order to ensure that the cohesion policy funds are spent in an efficient and effective way, there are a number of enabling conditions that have to be in place before payment applications for payment. The Commission can make payments to the managing authorities, and here on the left-hand side you can see the smart specialization as enabling condition for any research and innovation investment. So this is, I think, important if you want to create synergies, complementarities. You have to see in a particular region for a particular investment or activity, you have to see, is this in line with the regional development objectives of the region, with the smart specialization strategy, with the priorities of the region. And so they have to be consistent with the smart specialization strategies, the supported operations, and in terms of strategy, you have these enabling conditions, and where the Commission then has to approve that there is a good governance of the strategy throughout the programming period. I think the next slide, please. I think that's then Raphael takes over.
Raphael Pollogini is now going to introduce us to the ESF Plus.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. If I may, I will stop my video because I'm not very sure about the connection from here. So to complement what Maximilian and Peter just said, about the ESF Plus, just focus on skills. It has been said also in here, skills in Horizon Europe Cluster 4 are a key issue. They are key for achieving industrial leadership, for example, or increase autonomy in key strategic value chains. It has been said already. And skills can also be a response to the challenges in relations to skill shortages, also while up and reskilling are often identified in research projects. So that is where the European Social Fund Plus can make a difference. The scope of the ESF Plus is clear and wide. Let me read you an article 162. It says, in order to improve employment opportunities for workers in the internal market, the European Social Fund shall aim to render the employment of workers easier and to facilitate their adaptation to industrial changes and to changes in production systems, in particular through vocational training and retraining. That is why the ESF Plus can be particularly relevant, also talking about synergies, because the fund offers a wide range of opportunities. So to create different type of things, but particularly to create the trainings to help the program achieve maximum impact. It is indeed, or an innovation, sorry, is indeed useless, let's say, if people are not equipped with the right skill set, so they can deploy actually the new product, the new services, and developed also thanks to Horizon Europe. So some examples of action, you have some in here on your screen. Development and deployment of innovative curricula, teaching methods, technologies for education and training courses, but we can also talk about partnerships between higher education, business, and research organizations, for example. But we're talking also about a support to teachers, trainers, researchers, students through training, loans, scholarships. So ESF Plus gives support to the specific objectives just mentioned also by Peter earlier, but ESF gives also support to social innovation in all member states. Perhaps the next slide, please. Thank you very much. A few words on how the ESF Plus work and how you can actually have access to this support, fostering synergies once again between funds. So it has been said also the ESF Plus is the main use fund for investing in people. It works mostly under shared management, meaning that the European Commission entrusts the member states with implementing programs at national or regional level. So then this is a duty of the member state to allocate the fund to end recipients. These end recipients being companies, associations, private organizations, based on partnership and co-financing principle. That's what you have here in the schema quite put clearly, let's say. And so the ESF Plus is aligned with the recommendations provided under the European semester, which is a framework for coordinating economic and social policies across the EU. And this is why, because of the shared management process and framework, that I would like to stress the importance for you to liaise with the managing authorities of the fund within your own regions, your own countries, to advertise, let's say, your work and to stress the importance of developing training material also for your own advantage. Meaning, if these training are selected by the managing authorities, you are going to be upscaled, also repeated, and the creators of the training would be then the best place to hold the training themselves. So as a few words for conclusion, I would say have a look at the ESF and the ESF Plus websites. Programming of new priorities are still ongoing, including consultation of partners and stakeholders. New ESF Plus programs are expected to come into force by 2022. So it is still time to make your voices heard. Once again, having in mind that synergies can be really, really useful. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Lennart for Wendland is going to take us over the state aid rules and the connection with synergies.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Nicola. Now this is for something completely different. It is about synergies and why there's a connection with EU state aid rules. The reason is that EU state aid control applies to state resources. This means member state resources. They are under control of the member states. Now, resources, however, that are centrally managed by the EU, for instance, under Horizon Europe or Horizon 2020, those resources do not constitute state resources and are not subject to EU state aid rules. Now, the thing is that resources under shared management, like ESF Plus, like regional funds, cohesion policy funds in general, actually they come from the EU, but they are still subject to state aid rules. Why is this so? It is because member states actually have control over these resources. They are conferred to member states, and member states have quite some margin when implementing these programs and allocating these resources. For instance, member states can select beneficiaries. This makes these resources state resources, so they are subject to state aid rules. So there's a completely different set of rules that applies
And this is why, in order to create effective synergies between, on the one hand, Horizon, and on the other hand, funds that are subject to state aid rules, we need conducive state aid rules that facilitate such synergies, that make it easy to grant state aid also for objectives in the EU under EU funding. This is what the recently amended General Block Exemption Regulation is doing. So these are state aid rules that will facilitate the granting of aid from shared resources for projects that are also eligible under Horizon Europe. So with this, I move to the next slide, please. And here, first of all, Peter, would you want to explain a bit more about Seal of Excellence, or should I do that?
Yes, I can do that. No problem. It's so Seal of Excellence. Oh, we're going straight to the Seal of Excellence. Okay, that's fine. Good. So this is, I mean, we're now coming to the mechanics of how to do synergies, and in practice in an operational way, so in very concrete terms. And here we have the Seal of Excellence is already the longest established, I would say, synergy instrument since 2015. And what does it mean? It's a quality label that shows that a proposal submitted to a call of proposals exceeded all the evaluation thresholds that were set in the work program, but it could not be funded due to a lack of budget available for that call of proposals. And then it might still receive support from other union or national sources of funding by way of this Seal of Excellence recognition. So then, in this case, when such a proposal receives the Seal of Excellence, it might look for alternative ways of funding, for example, from the ERDF programs. Of course, as I mentioned, it's important still that the project is then aligned with the cohesion policy program priorities in the respective region and the smart specialization strategy. Under Horizon Europe, the calls that are awarding a Seal of Excellence, they will be indicated in the work program. Typically, they have been given to mono-beneficiaries like SME instrument in the past, so the EIC Accelerator. There's a EIC Transition Call open, MSCA, EIC Proof of Concept, teaming, these kind of projects. It's not excluded to also support multi-beneficiaries, but this is not, for practical implementation reasons, this so far has been limited to mono-beneficiaries. So what is new in the new programming period is that the implementation of the seal is simplified. We have mirroring provisions also in the cohesion policy regulation, Horizon Europe regulation. Cohesion policy managing authorities, they can make full and direct use of the Horizon Europe selection procedure. There's no need for another technical evaluation of the RNI quality of the project proposal. They can use the same eligibility rules and also the maximum funding rates. So so this is simplifying the implementation in future. And I mean, one very important, maybe the biggest also change is also related to this state aid treatment. And for this, I'll hand back to Bernhard.
Yes, Peter, indeed. As I said, when looking at the previous slide, we have two sources of funding. Here, in this case, EU funding is not available. So it's member state funding that can fill the gap. This funding comes from shared management resources and therefore is subject to state aid rules. Now, just in order to facilitate the granting of aid for Seals of Excellence projects, for this purpose, there's a new rule in the General Block Exemption Regulation that facilitates the granting of such aid. This means that member states can just go ahead and replace the EU funding that's not available up to a maximum of 2.5 million euro per project. And based on what the EU has already found to be eligible for aid. So there's not much administrative effort to be done by member states, and state aid can easily be granted to replace EU funding that's not available for a project that's worthwhile funding. And with this, to the next slide, please, and Peter.
I think the next one is related to transfer. So one slide before. Yes, so this is really also a novelty under Horizon Europe. It's the possibility also under the cohesion policy legislation, mirroring provisions, as I mentioned, the possibility to transfer funds from shared management funds or from the ERDF, for example, to Horizon Europe. Again, like the Seal of Excellence and all the other possibilities to implement synergies, it's voluntary. It's a possibility, not an obligation for managing authorities. So there's a possibility to transfer up to 5% of the initial allocation of each fund under shared management to any other fund under direct indirect management for the benefit of the member state concerned. And then once the transfer has occurred, it's the rules of the fund of the instrument to which the resources are applied. These rules apply in full. So if transfer from ERDF to Horizon Europe's rules apply. For example, could be that a member state or region decides to transfer resources to Horizon Europe to fund project proposals that were considered excellent, but there was not sufficient budget in the call. So proposals that would otherwise have received a seal of excellence, they can also decide, member states, to transfer the resources to Horizon Europe, and then these are funded directly under Horizon Europe. These project proposals would then be full Horizon projects with under Horizon Europe rules and following the same implementation process as any other Horizon Europe project. There's also a safeguard, just to mention, also that has been introduced. So should there be any resources that are not fully used for the benefit of the transferring region or member state, then under certain conditions, there can also be then a transfer back of the unused amount of funding. So yeah, and for the state aid considerations, Bernhard, back to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Now the question arises, are these funds that once were under control of the member states are still subject to state aid rules, even if these funds are transferred back to the EU? That's a tricky question. The answer is, however, simple. If the member states do not attach any conditions to these transferred resources, so that is no longer possible for member states to effectively select beneficiaries. So that this is entirely up to the EU then under its funding instruments to choose the beneficiaries, then these resources in fact do no longer constitute state resources. They are no longer state aid. What's important though is that there are no more conditions attached, except this is the one condition that's allowed, that these funds are used in the regions for which actually they had been allocated. So they benefit those assisted regions and regions that are eligible for the cohesion policy funds. So that's an important thing. And with this, we go next to the next slide and over to Peter.
Sorry, the teaming slide before, please. Yeah, exactly. So what is, I mean, we have we had in the past under the widening part of Horizon Europe, the teaming actions, and with the objective to create new or modernize existing centers of excellence by means of a close partnership with leading institutions abroad. So this is prevails, it remains. Also, the project that has to be, I mean, as in the past, there has to be complementary funding of that amount being at least equal to the total amount requested under Horizon Europe. So it's in a way type of combined funding. What is new in the new period under Horizon Europe is that similar as for the Seal of Excellence, there's a possibility to apply Horizon Europe rules on the eligible costs, activities, and the funding rates. And yeah, again, also with the Seal of Excellence, that operations that are supported by the complementary source, they have to comply with the scope of the supporting program. So they have to be, of course, contributing to the smart specialization strategy type of project. Otherwise, this would not be supported by the ERDF. What is new is that there's a possibility of a joint evaluation of both parts, so of the Horizon Europe part and the complementary funding from the ERDF under Horizon Europe. So a single evaluation of both parts with also state aid implications for this. Bernhard, please.
Could we now accelerate, please, so that we also have time for...
We lost some time, clear. So again, the question arises, is it possible to quite easily and quickly grant state aid to complement EU funding for a teaming project? Yes, it is, under the new amended general block exemption regulation. So member states can complement funding for any R&D and innovation related activity under a teaming action, and they can also support investment in project-related tangible and intangible assets, for instance, infrastructures, up to 70% of the eligible costs. And with this, to the next slide. That was quick.
Yes. So for the partnerships, I'll just cover this quickly as well. There is now the possibility that is also new that the financial contributions from programs co-financed by the ERDF or ESF Plus, EMFF, and EAFRD, they can be used as a national contribution to the European partnerships, co-funded in institutionalized partnerships. This is something that was added to the initial Commission proposal by the co-legislators and is a new possibility. So, Bernhard, if you want to add something on this.
Very quickly. Also here, there's a new article in the general block exemption regulation that allows member states to complement EU funding in a co-funded or institutionalized partnership up to the funding rates that are actually allowed for the project after selection and ranking under Horizon Europe. So just look it up. It's all this is in force since 3rd of August. Thank you. And the next one. Yeah, so just very quickly, now what's the advantage of the general block exemption regulation? Again, the main advantage is that aid granted under these new articles that allow synergies, that facilitate synergies, that such aid doesn't have to be notified to the Commission for an ex-ante approval by the Commission. Member states can just implement the aid and just have to inform the Commission of the granting of the aid. So this is a very quick and easy procedure. The state aid is automatically authorized. And the other main advantage is that under these new synergy-friendly state aid rules, member states do not again have to assess the eligibility of a project for state aid because it has already been assessed by the central funding instruments, the Seal of Excellence, or by the partnerships. So member states can just follow these eligibility assessments and grant the aid. This is also something that we think will accelerate the process of public support granting. Thank you. And then next.
Yes, to finish the presentation part on synergies with cohesion policy, I would just like to underline that, okay, we have spoken now a bit over the mechanics and the new possibilities to achieve synergies, complementarities, but then there's also one important aspect which is maybe even less difficult in terms of provisions that need to be put in place, but also very important in terms of synergies. And this is these are the upstream, downstream synergies, parallel synergies that can be achieved by investing in the different funds. So, for example, you would have the possibilities for upstream synergies if the ERF programs decide to support companies or universities or research centers to support them to successfully compete in the Horizon Europe program with capacity building actions, for example, training, or they can support R&I skills, incubators, all this, that one leads to another. On the same token, also, we have the downstream synergies possibilities that, for example, Horizon projects that could not arrive to the market with Horizon support only, and there the ERDF could support closer to the market actions, could support capitalization of Horizon Europe results, of innovative solutions developed under the Horizon Europe. If you have as Horizon does not reach these higher TRL levels, this is sort of the ERDF can be very complementary in that respect. There's also a number of dissemination and exploitation tools available under Horizon Europe, just to mention the Horizon results platform, matchmaking tools, all being developed and made available. And finally, also just to mention, parallel synergies can also be important. For example, if you take the missions, for example, you need a certain critical mass of projects, of activities to support the objectives. Then you might also have activities that are going in the same direction and in parallel. Considered by cohesion policy programs. So yeah, I think with this, just to mention, I think this is then the very last slide. Now we have the programming going on. I mean, we have the work programs out for Horizon Europe, but the ERDF, ESF Plus programming is in full progress. And so this is now really the moment also to, on the ground, we're doing this at our level, of course, within the Commission, but also for the actors on the ground, get in contact with your regional, with your national managing authorities of these programs. There's a partnership principle also for the implementation of the cohesion policy program. So economic, social, relevant actors, partners have to be taken on board in the design of these programs and also in the implementation. So, I just can warmly invite actors to contact the relevant authorities, get in touch, to be involved. The research and innovation actors are explicitly mentioned also in the cohesion policy legislation as partners that should be taken on board. So with this, I will finish my part.
Many thanks. And now Crispin Weymouth, DG Grow, is going to talk about the single market program.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for that. Just what I know, if you can maybe go back. If you can go back one. Yeah, thank you. Just I want to talk about the single market program and obviously the synergies, but I want to specifically narrow in on one element or a couple of elements there that we think are particularly of interest to you and particularly connected to what we're doing under Horizon Europe and the synergies. So just to give you the overall picture of what the single market program looks like, really, if you look at it, you will see that it's a bunch of previous programs kind of bolted together. And in particular, COSME, if somebody can remove, there's a slight blockage in the way. Nick, thanks. But also elements such as improving the single market, standardization, consumers and end users, the food chain, and European statistics. Next slide, please. Thanks. Now, in terms of budget, it's not a big budget, but it is, and it's, if you look at it on the first hand, you kind of think, well, food chain, this is the key thing. But actually, I think where the interest for you is perhaps the red part of the pie, which is the competitiveness of enterprises, the former COSME competitiveness of SMEs element. But there are also money going to fund Eurostat, to fund the standardization process, the commitments the European Commission makes, the payments that it makes towards CEN and CENELEC, and obviously on the food chain to ensuring the security of supply. Next slide, please. So I just want to narrow down on that cosmic part, which, as I said, it's a vestige of the former program, and it's now a core part of the single market program. And it's really got 6 elements. The first thing is it's about the support to SMEs, clusters, and other business organizations and so it's not just direct support. More importantly, it supports the people who can support, to local innovation agencies, regional development agencies, clusters, and other actors. And obviously, the aim is to foster the growth, scale up, and creation of SMEs. It's about access to finance, spotting barriers, and addressing them, and that includes the single market, but also beyond third countries. The US, Canada, the UK, now Switzerland, and Asia. It's also about fostering entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial skills. I'm not going to go into this today, but it's responsible. Part of that is the Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs program, enabling entrepreneurs to get experience in another country. And we're about to come up to the magical mark of 10,000 exchanges since the program was created. It's about creating a favorable business environment, including supporting digital transformation. And by the way, this is something under the new SMP, obviously, as you would expect, a big focus on sustainability and digitalization, and increasingly on resilience. There's some funding to the competitiveness of industrial ecosystems and sectors, particularly important as we bounce back from the crisis, and particularly important for ecosystems such as tourism, textile, construction, automotive, that suffered acutely during the crisis. And finally, as I said, a support to the modernization of industry, contributing to a green, digital, and resilient economy. Next slide, please. So I just want to channel in onto 2 elements in that I think are of particular interest, and where there are strong potential synergies with Horizon Europe. The first is the Enterprise Europe Network, the EN. If you don't know it, you should, because it's fantastic. It's the world's largest support network for SMEs. We get together, we provide top-up funding on top of what's happening at local level, in chambers of commerce, innovation agencies, regional development agencies, and others, to provide dedicated services for SMEs. We are building on what they're doing at local level, but we're connecting them up. And so what it's trying, if you can just stay on that slide, it's about helping ambitious European businesses to innovate. And so a lot of it is dedicated innovation advice that we give, and access to finance, and I will give you a full picture in a second, increase their competitiveness. And above all, this is the EU element, is to try and encourage them to export within the single market and beyond. This is not a competitor to consultancies. EN services are entirely free of charge, and all EN services must have a European dimension and provide EU added value to clients. Next slide, please. Yeah, just to give you a kind of a picture of the broad range of services that the EN provides. There's some information and awareness raising on, say, barriers or how to deal with bureaucratic hurdles if you're looking to export or expand your business into a new member state. There's a lot of dedicated advice. You know, they look at what is a company's need if it's to grow and internationalize and innovate further. There's a lot of capacity building and training as to both on regulations and on the specific needs of the companies. Innovation support. This is trying to sit with the company and say, this is where you need to innovate, where you need to develop new products and services, looking at the innovation processes in that company. A lot of support. It's not direct finance, but enabling SMEs to navigate the many sources of finance, both public and private, at local level, at national level, and at European level, and to see where they target their efforts to get the finance they need. And again, this builds on what Maximilian was saying earlier about the pathway from research to deployment. Often there's a whole mass of information out there, and what the EN can do is it can help SMEs to say, okay, this is funding, this European Innovation Council, this might be very interesting to you, or this project could be very interesting to you, and also give them support in their application. Things that many companies, particularly the smaller ones, are obviously less experienced with applying for these things. They can also help them engage with banks and venture capitals. A critical element is they help them partner with each other between member states and internationally, and to connect up and to develop new services and products together. And they make them aware of public procurement opportunities. Next slide, please. The EN is developing. We are coming to the end of the existing network, and we are in the process of finalizing contracts for the new network that will start on the 1st of January. And this was a chance for us to carry out a big upgrade, what we call the EN vision, increasing performance and making sure that no matter where you arrive, and by the way, there's a lot of synergies that we're developing with digital innovation hubs and with the clusters, that you get the service that you need. And we partner with those other networks to make sure that the client is at the center, and they refer to different networks for their different needs, or to different parts of the EN for different services. But we're also putting in place new sustainability advisors from the 1st of January, who will advise not just on the green transition, but on the social transition, giving dedicated support to companies, say on waste management, on energy efficiency, on all of the aspects of the green transition. Very important, as I said, synergies on digitalization. We're looking at how we can best support SMEs to make the digital transition, helping them to get the benefits of free trade agreements. We work a lot with our colleagues in DG Trade on that, on awareness. And this is something that we announced in the updated industrial strategy in May this year, cooperation to address resilience and supply chain disruptions. We're now putting in place much more effective mechanisms to identify supply chain disruptions and to resolve them, but also to deal with the longer term weaknesses or strategic dependencies. So that's the EN. And finally, if we can move on, the cluster initiatives. This is a slightly different structure to the EN. It's a mosaic of measures to build on the cluster organizations and cluster managers that you have across Europe. A couple of important elements there are the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, a database that enables partnerships between different clusters at regional and local level, or between relevant partnerships in different industrial ecosystems. We also have what's called the European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center, which is a source of information on energy efficiency, resource efficiency, the transition to low carbon, and the circular economy. Valuable information for advisors. We have an international element, which is the EU Go International. We just last month, we had a joint matchmaking with the EN in Singapore to help companies develop matches. We have the European Observatory of Clusters, and what we're developing now is what we call the Euro Clusters, which is a set of dedicated projects across the 14 industrial ecosystems and addressing sustainability, digitalization, and resilience. So that's a real snapshot of what we've got going on here. Very interesting synergies, because we can help companies get EIC funding or funding under Horizon Europe, or we can help them perhaps, as Peter was talking about the Seal of Excellence, this can also be useful. So it's the human component to the funding component. And we're also continuously in discussions with DG RTD about how EN advisors can partner with other things like the national contact points under Horizon Europe. So that's my word.
Thank you very much, Crispin. And now Mathieu Delecluse, DG Connect, will take us briefly over the digital policy and Digital Europe program.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I will be quick. I think we have less than 15 minutes to cover the Digital Europe and Space Program and the Defense Fund. So just a few slides on Digital Europe, which you know is a new program which did not exist so far and which is starting this year until 2027. The first work program 21-22 was just adopted on the 10th of November, and the first calls opened on the 17th of November. So it's really now timely to have some information about this. But before I go into the Digital Europe program as such, just one slide and one policy context, which I think is important to bear in mind when we are talking about digital, whether it's in Horizon Europe or in the Digital Europe program. It's the Digital Decade communications published by the Commission in March, which sets out a vision, the objectives and targets for the digital transformation by 2030. So it's really the kind of overarching policy document as far as digital is concerned in the EU. So the policy strategy and framework really where all initiatives are fitting and should contribute. And this was reinforced in September by a proposal by the Commission for a policy program for the digital decade. It's called Path to the Digital Decade Policy Program. It is now being negotiated between the co-legislators, the Council and the Parliament, and it is setting also a process, cooperation process with the member states to achieve the digital transformation together over the next decade, according to the vision and the objectives and the targets set for 2030. And it's really important to start with these two policy documents, which really are setting the frame and the initiatives, also the projects that will be the investments that will be done under Horizon Europe and Digital Europe program in the digital area are all taking place in that framework, in that perspective, and in particular the four cardinal points that you see here as structuring the vision. I will not go over all of them, but you recognize the basic elements that are necessary to develop for the digital area: skills, advanced skills and basic skills in digital infrastructures, of course, in terms of connectivity, but also data, edge and cloud, the digital transformation of businesses, the digital transformation of government and the public sector as well. So these are really the four cardinal points where we want to make progress and achieve the digital transformation according to a certain number of targets that are just taken up here on that slide. On the next slide, I will now go to the Digital Europe program. Next slide, please, Nicolas, where just to situate the Digital Europe program in the portfolio of programs, it is, I would say, just after, in terms of sequencing in a way of project development after Horizon Europe. It is about, Digital Europe is about deployment, take-up of digital technologies, deployment of digital capacities and infrastructure. So it's really about buying machines. It's about developing skills, training and courses. It's about really something which is tangible, which comes after it has been elaborated and thought through in research innovation activities. So it is really downwards in that sense, and focusing on the traditional weakness of Europe in terms of the deployment and take-up of technologies that were developed in research and innovation programs. On the next slide, you see the structure of the Digital Europe program. It is built around 4 pillars, in fact 5, but 4 that you see in yellow here, which we also call specific objectives of the program. One area is the high performance computing. Second is artificial intelligence, data, cloud and edge. And third is cybersecurity. Fourth is the advanced digital skills. And a fifth specific objective, which cuts across all of these areas, which is about the take-up, the diffusion of the technologies in SMEs, locally, also in administrations, through various actions that are really focused on the diffusion of those technologies throughout the economy and the public sector. And the European Digital Innovation Hubs that you heard already about are the kind of really the backbone for this diffusion across all regions in Europe. And this is also something funded under Digital Europe. On the next slide, you see the breakdown of the budget over the 5 pillars I've just mentioned. In total, the program amounts to 7.6 almost billion euro over the 7 years. And this is broken down as you see here. So a larger part goes to the infrastructure type of deployment on high performance computing, artificial intelligence, cloud and data, and cybersecurity. And then you have a sizable portion also to develop actions on advanced digital skills, and then the digital innovation hubs and the diffusion through the economy through a number of actions, 1 billion euro in orange. On the next slide, it's a summary of what is aimed under each of these pillars. On the high performance computing, the aim is to really buy machines, as I said, procure what we call exascale machines, the highest performing computing capacities that are available globally, upgrade existing supercomputers. We go also towards quantum computing deployment as well, and to widen the access to such supercomputing capacities. Artificial intelligence, it's about data spaces to be developed in Europe, common data spaces in various sectors of the economy, manufacturing, agriculture, health, and the likes. Also, testing and experimentation facilities in certain number of sectors for AI technologies. So before going live or before going really full development of AI technologies, there is a need to test in a real environment and experiment. So this is something that can be done under these infrastructures that have to be developed and further deployed through Digital Europe. And then we also have an AI platform to access a number of already tested AI technologies and to put them available for all types of users. In terms of advanced digital skills, it's about developing master courses or short-term trainings, job placements. And for the deployment, as I said, the digital innovation hubs on the left side is really the backbone, but that you see a number of other actions, concrete actions that I will not detail for the sake of time. And on cybersecurity, an important infrastructure, which is quantum communication infrastructure, to be also deployed in the next years, and under Digital Europe, competence centers and networks of competence centers in the member states to better detect, address, and respond to cyber attacks. In the last slide, just a few features in terms of implementation. How does it look like compared to Horizon Europe? It's also based on work programs for 2 years, each work program. There is also a call text which accompanies the work program, which gives a lot of details about how to submit proposals. So really, all questions you may have on how to respond to a call in Digital Europe, you will find the response in the call text next to the work program. The funding schemes is relatively similar to Horizon, although there are some important differences. The grants have a cost reimbursement of 50% rate instead of higher rates in Horizon. For SMEs, the rate is still also a bit higher, of 75%. And for the coordination and support actions in Digital Europe, it will also be at 100% like in Horizon. But you will also see much more use and a wider use of procurement actions in Digital Europe rather than grants. Grants are also there, but procurement is also something more widely used, and this is because of the acquisition. Really, as I mentioned, the deployment, it's the nature of the program is slightly different in that respect. There is also a possibility to co-fund the members by the member states with public funding. It's also mandatory in some of the actions, in particular in the testing and experimentation facilities for AI. You heard a lot of things already about the synergies between the cohesion policy funds and directly managed programs. So that's something that could happen here. And then finally, to mention that there are some restrictions as regards the participation of entities which are not based in the EU or which are controlled by non-EU entities or non-EU states. So here also in terms of security, there are some measures which are taken in the participation in the Digital Europe program, which is altogether less open to non-EU participation than Horizon Europe. Thank you very much, and I leave the floor to Nicolas.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. And now Mats Ljungqvist from DG Defis is going to take us very briefly, 3 minutes, Mats, over the space program.
3 minutes. All right, thank you very much, colleagues. No, joke aside, I will spend a bit more than 3 minutes, but be very brief, no problem. We have touched upon this earlier also in the info day. So we have a space program that encompasses the 2 main components, Galileo EGNOS satellite navigation and Copernicus Earth observation, and 2 new components, space surveillance and tracking. So space situational awareness, space awareness and tracking, space weather and similar, and governmental satellite communication. And this is an operational program, meaning there's no research funding in this program. It manages, it builds satellites, it launches satellites, and it operates the services. And associated to this, of course, access to space, the launcher activities, support to startup companies, and security-related aspects. It's altogether 13 billion euro, and mainly through procurement actions. But of course, a lot of money goes to industry for building and developing the satellites to be launched for this program. There are 2 associated new initiatives, the EU Launcher Alliance and Secure Connectivity, which is intended to support this as well, coming up in the near future. Next slide. So some synergies with other parts of Horizon Europe, very briefly. There is an IOD-IOV support from Cluster 4 for this. So IOD-IOV stands for In-Orbit Demonstration and Validation, which will launch the Eagle-1 space mission together with ESA for quantum communication research. There are synergies, of course, with the various partnerships within Horizon Europe. They are listed here. There are references to Galileo, EGNOS, and Copernicus program across Horizon Europe. It's important to note there that Horizon Europe supports the Galileo, EGNOS, and Copernicus activities with the research component, but there's also a flowing back of utility from these systems into the research program. So many parts of Horizon Europe will rely on precise satellite navigation and Earth observation for many of the activities, not least in climate change activities and so on. So there are references in the work program on this. There's also synergies between the Cassini initiative on space entrepreneurship and the EIC Invest EU program that we heard about a bit previously. Finally, next slide, please. A few words about synergies between space and defense and security. There is an action plan on synergies published earlier in 2021, where the Commission proposes a series of actions to increase autonomy and strengthen the space, defense, and security sectors by exploiting those synergies, by identifying and reducing vulnerabilities in the supply chains and value chains, to mitigate the risk of strategic dependence in these areas, and to make sure that R&D efforts lead to benefits for European industry. There is an action in this action plan, Action 4, which is specifically devoted to EU Observatory of Critical Technologies for for monitoring the situation of dependency and vulnerable supply chains. This action plan is accompanied by the CHIPS Act, which is also there to secure supply of microchips and encourage innovation in this area, together, of course, with the digital program. Next slide. Finally, a few words on the European Defence Fund, then. It fits neatly with this action plan on space and defense synergies. The Defence Fund has been launched. It's part of Horizon Europe. It is a bit of a separate chapter. It supports research and development in this area with about 8 billion euro over the 7 years. But it then, of course, does not support the acquisition of material. This is part of the activities, but it's member state support. Naturally, this is some coordination of this acquisition done through the EU. So of this, still maybe we can stay a few minutes. On this research support, I will just give a few examples in the little box there on satellite navigation, on resilient satellite communication, on AI, on radio frequency components and other components as well, on quantum technologies, and on additive manufacturing, which we recognize, of course, from the space program, from the digital part of Cluster 4 and from other parts of Horizon Europe. So there's a lot of commonalities and opportunities for synergy. That's all from me today. Thank you very much for your time.
Many thanks to all the colleagues. You can send questions through your national contact points and indeed the Enterprise Europe Network. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.